Hello and welcome to Aspects of Writing. I'm your host, James Kelly, and my panelist for today is Janet Corsi. Our guests are Judy Salz.
Yes.
Yes, okay. And Judy Logan. And the topic of the show is discovering our inner self through writing. And Jan, you're my panelist. I'd like for you to tell our audience a little bit about you and the secrets of time.
Well, I was going to write a really angry letter to somebody who was running for office, and I thought, yeah, they'll just throw that letter away, so I'll just write a book, and then everybody can read about what I'm mad about. And so far, so good.
All right. But the secrets of time is about a clock. I'll give the synopsis. It's about a clock.
I'm not mad about the clock.
And it's about a woman who kind of talks to the clock. It's been in the family like 147 years, something like that.
Yes.
And it's got secrets. And she one day, in anger, hits the side of the clock, and a panel opens and some letters fall out. And she starts to discover her past through that clock and all the secrets that have gone through the generations in her family.
And that it's okay to make a mistake in life.
Yeah.
It's a good book.
lesson.
She's got secrets, too, that she ends up
Right.
writing and
Yeah.
putting in the clock
Yes.
as well.
It's a good book. Do read it.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, thank you.
All right. So our first guest, I'm going to let Jan introduce.
Well, I am really privileged to introduce Judy Logan. And she's been a guest on our show for many, many times for over the last 6 years. And it's always such a pleasure. Judy, but for those who are watching us for the very first time or listening to us for the first time, tell us a little about you and what you're writing about.
As Janet said, my name is Judy Logan. I took the Shine back to honor my mother and father.
Oh,
That was my maiden name. And although it was tough growing up with that name, Judy Shine, Shoe Shine,
Oh, yeah.
Monkey
Sunshine.
Shine, all that sunshine, I did want to put that in there to honor them, and I'm glad I did. I worked in a department of psychiatry at a community hospital for 12 years and began in the psych department. And that was very difficult.
Yeah.
We had 9 units and inpatient, outpatient therapy and neuropsychology. And in that capacity, I would see women come in all the time with battering signs. And I'd see someone's face all bruised and smushed. And I'm like, why? What's going on? And, of course, the therapist couldn't talk to me about what was happening.
Right.
But I was the coordinator of all the admins in the 9 units, and my women would be typing those reports. So it kind of, and it was appalling to see and then read about some of the things that these women put up with.
Yeah.
And then, of course, there were the children. And the children would end up being in our locked children's unit, not because they were violent and dangerous, because their parents were.
Protect them. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, that disturbed me so badly. And I began writing, well, I like to laugh and say I signed my own birth certificate, but I would change that date now. But it was a thing that stuck with me and stuck in my gut. So when I was working full-time, my husband was working, we worked alternate shifts, and I had 3 kids. I had to do something for fun.
Right.
So I started writing, and I wrote the first portion of the book, which was called The Widow. And it was about my grandmother, whose husband died very young, and she raised her 7 kids on her own. And so I thought, oh, man, and she never dated, pined for him till she was 86 years old.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yep. And I thought, oh, my God, Graham had this wonderful love, and then these other women are getting battered,
Yeah.
and their batterers tell them they love them?
Yeah.
What's up with that? I don't get it. So the struggle within me was trying to reconcile the two. So I decided to write a book about a widow, recently widowed woman, age 55, got to get her first job, no job skills, and her supervisor is a young battered wife and mother who gets the, excuse me, the boss to hire her. And she's not easy to deal with. As we know, widowhood is tough.
Yeah.
But anyway, I put the 2 women together to see what would happen.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
All right.
It's strange, though, because my gal's also 50 years old and a widow, and there's so much similarity between the 2 women, yet completely different stories.
Yes, and I
Yeah.
think we touched upon a universal kind of theme
Human.
and need.
Yeah,
Definitely.
yeah.
Yep.
All right, so can you tell us where we can get your book, Shelter Me?
My book is available in all online stores, also through the publisher Ink and Quill, and they are in Henderson, Nevada.
All right.
Very good.
Okay, our next guest was born and raised in New York City.
Yes.
Dr. Judy Salz earned her AB in psychology from Barnard.
Yes.
Okay, good. College,
You're doing very well.
Columbia University. We have a doctor who's going to correct me, I'm sure, somewhere along the way. And received her MD from the Women's Medical College of Pennsylvania. I got Pennsylvania right?
Yes,
Okay, all right.
good going.
She completed her internship and residency in internal medicine at
Montefiore. No, Montefiore.
I had it down before we went on air.
Yeah.
It's okay. It's named after Moses Montefiore, who was a Jewish philanthropist in England.
Oh, okay. See, and I thought that was a French word.
Yeah, me too.
Wrong, of course. And that's in the Bronx, by the way. And then she moved to the West and fellowshipped in adolescent medicine at Children's Hospital of Los Angeles. She joined the Southern California Permanente Medical Group and practiced internal medicine for over 29 years.
Yep.
And after retiring from primary care, she moved to Las Vegas. She's a member of, that's kind of a switch. She's a member of the American Board of Internal Medicine and the American College of Physicians. You only partially retired, though, because you currently are you're in clinical research?
Yes,
And
yes.
what does that involve?
Okay, I'm a principal investigator with a group of people who contract with different pharmaceutical companies that are trying out new drugs, and they need to do testing, clinical testing.
Yeah,
So
you know,
I'm part of that process.
I just heard an ad on the radio for the first time about this, where the pharmaceutical companies are actually advertising clinical research and the importance of that clinical research.
Yes,
Yep.
that's the way new drugs come about.
Yeah.
They have to be tested.
Yeah. So, I mean, somebody's got, they have to test it. So, and you're a single parent, and you discovered that retirement isn't exactly the tranquility you thought it would be.
No.
So you took up oil painting, and you're also performing at the Las Vegas Master Singers, the course in residence of the Las Vegas Philharmonic.
Yes.
And that helps fill your void a little bit.
Yes, that's my primal scream therapy.
And it says
fun.
here, so when your daughter suggested half jokingly that you forego shopping to write a book, you leaped to the task. So literally your daughter encouraged you to write a book?
Literally, I was
Okay.
spending too much time buying clothes.
Well, the results of that is Worthy, and that was published in November. I actually know your publisher as well. He's been on our show, Brian Ruff, for
Yes.
Imagine. And can you tell us a little bit about the book Worthy?
Worthy came about as again at the behest of my daughter, who got tired of my spending money on clothes, and it started out as a medical story because I'm a medical doctor, and it morphed into more of an inspirational story about friendship between three people who are damaged because of early lifetime experiences, damaged emotionally, and.
Her friend Judy just positioned her to the mic.
Moving right along. I'm a slow learner. And because of their intellectual problems, not intellectual, but emotional problems, they bond as a group and help themselves to find their own self-esteem and self-worth, and in doing so, also discover something that helps the world.
Okay. And this is a fictional story.
It's fictional.
As is Shelter Me, by the way.
Yes.
But we're going to get into how there's a lot of truth in both these books, though, in a few minutes. All right.
Yeah.
So you're working on a second book as well.
I am working on a second book. I'm almost there.
Okay.
Almost there.
All right. And where can we learn about your book?
Worthy?
Yes.
Worthy can be found. There's a lot of places you can find it, but Worthy, the other one isn't published yet.
right, yeah.
Worthy
So we're
is
talking about
available on Amazon. I also have a webpage, which is authorjudysalz.com.
Okay. All right. Well, we're going to do a group discussion. We're going to be talking about discovering our inner self through writing, and you're both going to have a lot to talk about because that's how your books came about. I know a little bit about yours. To give an example, is that you actually wrote from events that you you basically saw yourself when you were a therapist
Yes.
at the hospital. And that's how these characters came to life in a way. So I'm going to read a little bit here, and we're going to talk about each one. How important is to write about what you know? And do you think that as authors, probably most people write about what they know?
Yes. How's that for a concise
I was hoping
answer?
you would say yes, since that is the topic today.
Indeed. No, I think it's almost impossible to leave yourself out when you're writing, because that's your basis of who you are and how you see the world. And unless you're writing science fiction, which is otherworldly, it's based on real life. And so, yes, you see yourself and your flaws and your strengths, and they creep into your characters.
And you know what I want to add to that, though, because you mentioned science fiction. You know, I'm a science fiction author as well, and I have a new book getting ready to come out. It actually came out in 2005. We've retitled it, revamped it, and it's coming out as the Alien Transcripts. But there is parts of me in that book. So even when you're writing science fiction, your characters can take on the persona of people that you know, or you know, and actually a lot of the characters, they have a persona of people that I have known in the past. So even in science fiction, you can use that in your writing.
Okay.
I think that's important also to, even though you've never been to the planets and worlds you've created,
Right.
you have to write from what you know, because then there's a sense of authenticity. There is a comfort in what you're able to describe and what you're able to draw people into. It would be like if I wrote about auto mechanics, I'm like, get that thingy over there and put it on the doohickey. It has no authenticity. It isn't coming from a place of knowledge.
Well, an example of what I'm talking about is like even places in my story, science fiction isn't always just in outer space. Mine is dealing with an alien, and there is a character who's under hypnosis in his mind, sees this alien and discloses who they are and where they came from and why. But we deal with Gene, Nevada. We deal with Las Vegas, Nevada. We deal with Area 51. So those are realities that I know.
Yes.
Yeah.
We deal with the characters which have aspects of people I've actually known. So that's what I'm talking about when that you are putting a lot of yourself into your writing a lot of times, no matter what you're writing.
Well, and that's a good point, too, because you talk about physical places here in Nevada that people have actually seen. So as you're describing different things, any of us who have driven from California here have seen all those things that you are describing.
A mound out in the desert at night.
And so it really...
A dry lake bed.
I created a place in North Carolina. I have never been to North Carolina. But what I did bother to do is look up the geographic into things and what the temperatures were like and what the actual surroundings would be like in an area that I was talking about. And so that you have to do some homework along with being creative.
True.
Yes.
Yeah.
My book starts with an earthquake.
Okay.
I just happened to have lived through the Northridge earthquake in
Okay.
1994.
Yeah.
That would do
So,
it.
yeah, so the description of what I saw during the earthquake very much mirrors what I saw during the earthquake.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and this is exactly what we're talking about, how it can mirror, your own life in many ways. So.
It's interesting you say that. I hadn't thought about this before in quite that way. But obviously, even with the battered husband, I've never battered anybody that I know of. My kids don't count.
I'll have to have them on the show.
Good luck to you.
They are still around, I hope.
Parts of them. But I think the difficulty for me was getting inside his head.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because first of all, I'm not a man. Second of all, I don't know what it is to overshadow somebody.
Yeah.
I can bully people. But I look
There's
at
another side to
at
that.
my new sister over here.
I'm not black and blue yet.
Just wait.
Keep them covered. But the thing is, I don't know how a man would react to something.
Yeah.
Excuse me. I don't. So I just made it up.
Yeah, but you know, sometimes we learn through osmosis. We actually learn from people we see or we talk to, or we overhear someone having a conversation. I'm one of those I'm not an eavesdropper in that I'm nosy, but sometimes I'll hear an interesting conversation at a restaurant, and I'll listen to what they're saying. I mean, and I think sometimes we do learn that way.
Absolutely.
Because it's open and raw when they're talking, especially if they're talking to someone about something that happened.
Right.
So you do learn that way, so
Yes.
you can pick up, from that persona.
Yeah,
All right.
I find myself becoming a nosy neighbor quite frequently. And when I'm in crowds,
Yeah.
I'll actually walk closer to somebody I don't even know to hear what it is they're talking about
I have to
to
tell
get an
you,
idea.
Remind me to stay away from you.
I know.
It's so funny you say the nosy neighbor because someone I know who used to be a landlady, she knew everything that was going on, and she would stick her nose out and stop and watch everything.
Oh, yeah.
I have a little dog that I now call by that same name because she stops and
Oh,
it's
no.
like, stop looking at the neighbors, do your business, and let's go.
There you go.
All right.
Maybe she's thinking about writing a book.
Better be careful.
So, do the characters take on their own personality once you have based them on a real person, or do they pretty much stay true to the character you developed them from? And by that, I mean, like sometimes when you have in mind a character and you think you know that character and how they think and what they do. But in my case, sometimes my characters alter course. And I let them, it sounds weird, but they become live in my
doesn't sound
mind.
weird.
So I let them tell me what they want to do next or how they're going to do something next. Or I'll often think that character wouldn't do it this way. You know, that's just not the way they would do this.
Yep.
So do you do that, ladies?
I do.
I would say Judy,
Yes.
but then it's Judy and Judy. So.
All right, so we can talk together over each other.
We always do.
Yes, we do. Yeah, no, very much so. I mean, again, this is my first novel, and this is my first experience in writing an expanded piece. I've done short stories that have been
Yes.
published, but not anything of this length. And 2 of the 3 characters are male,
Okay.
and I've never written a male character before.
Okay.
The female character, obviously, I can't say I'm her template, but there's a lot of me in her.
Yeah.
But for the men, I had really no idea, like Judy said, to get into their head and think the way they're thinking. But I write by the seat of my pants.
Okay.
I don't plan anything out in advance. And so I never know which way the book is going because, again, I'm following my characters. It sounds bizarre, but that's what I'm doing.
Okay.
Yep, and that's exactly how I do it. I don't outline. I sat down with 2 thoughts: my grandmother, the battered women. Where's this going to go? Where am I going to get them together?
Yeah.
And then I just let them take over.
Jan?
Exactly. Although my men characters, I found was kind of easy for me to write because I patterned them after my brothers and my dad.
Oh,
And so, because they have that, they put women first type attitude, and Dad was very protective of us girls, so my men were real easy to write.
Well, I'm going to tell you something bizarre that I just created this week. I started a story called The Painter. And in this story, it goes back to a 17th century painter, and then it takes place in present day. And the character in present day, who's an aristocrat, who's a closeted gay, sees this attractive young man, picks him up at a gallery. There's something in the paint that causes hallucinogenics. When this young man who comes back eventually is invited to this guy's house, and he sees these paintings that this guy's collecting from this unknown author from the 1800s. He's obsessed with these paintings from this unknown author, and actually ends up going on a journey to find all those paintings. There was like a dozen painted. And when this character touches the paint, from the hallucinogenics apparently, he starts thinking about the character from the 1800s who resembles the real life character from the 1800s resembles this person that he's seeing. But in present day, he's a man. In the past, he's a woman
interesting.
who fell in love with him in the
Yeah.
1800s.
Interesting.
So that's an interesting thing for me to be working on.
It's very
because I'm
interesting.
thinking from the male standpoint in present day, but from the female standpoint from the 1800s.
Exactly.
What
That's
a concept.
Very,
Yeah.
very nice twist.
Good for you.
I like that. I like that.
Oh, there's so many twists in this story.
Yeah.
Yeah, you wouldn't
I
believe.
like that.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
Great.
So, you kind of have to figure out how would, if this person was a reincarnation, let's say, of the woman from the 1800s,
Right.
how would that situation be? Because you have to think of all the aspects. Because I'm thinking
Right.
of the aspects of how they interacted. How is that different than if you were a male? I think about the lovemaking. How is that different than if you were a male? I mean, and so it's been fun writing this.
I
you know?
imagine.
Not to mention the difference in mores between the 1700s and now.
Right, exactly.
Very much different
Yeah.
expectations.
Yeah, and so
That's interesting because you would have to, introduce fear in present day. You'd have to, although I imagine there was prejudice back then, 1700s.
Well,
but,
back then though, it was a man and a woman.
Oh, that's right. That's
You know.
right. But and he would look at it and say, then why can't it be like that in my current life?
But what is interesting about when I get to toward the end of the show, and I'm actually working on the script too. Toward the end of the story, in the story, the woman dies in a train wreck.
Oh.
They're on a trip together with this new lover he has, and she ends up dying when they're in the Orient. And
They had trains then?
yeah,
Oh.
yeah, back in the 1800s.
Okay, 1800s, not 1700s.
Not 1700s.
Well, 17th century. I'm sorry, not 17th century.
19th
century.
century.
I said
Okay.
17th. I
Now
meant
we're good.
19th century.
Okay.
I meant 19th century.
There
but
we go.
anyway,
Okay, good.
Yeah, in the trains. And so anyway, there was a train wreck and she dies when they're in the Orient. But what happens is that the character of the present day, they are tracing his path of that painter from the 1800s. And they're laughing about how, what if this happened to us? And as they're saying that, a bus pulls in front of them and there's an accident. However, this character, the male character who was dreaming of being the woman in the 1800s, he went into a coma but did not die.
Interesting.
But what does happen is that the last painting they discovered by this painter, the aristocrat that's buying all these paintings, it's of a male, not a female.
Interesting.
And I'm not going to give too much away.
No, don't.
Wow.
Yeah.
That would be a
Only
great
thing I will
read.
tell you is that painting resembles the lover of present day.
Nice. Very nice.
Foreshadowing.
But there's a lot more to it than that.
I
Even.
have to get I have to get some books, some of those books. I want copies of those books.
But anyway, so you do have to think about, if you're looking at your inner self, they always say there's always the male and female in all of us.
Right. True.
So you kind of have to put yourself into that mode. If I was a guy, if your ladies are writing, what would this guy do? Because there's all these stereotypes. You always think that if you go into a men's locker room or you go into a men's bathroom, there's all this writing on the wall and stuff. But from what I understand, if you go into a women's restroom, sometimes you got just the same kind of stuff
Same
going on.
stupidness, yeah.
Yeah. And, they always say the guys talk dirty when they're in the bathroom, but I can guarantee probably if you walked into a women's restroom, you'd overhear some stuff being said there as well.
I'm sure.
Especially in school, in a school setting.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So.
Yeah. That's interesting. I'm going to ponder that. I'm going to ponder that.
I have to start looking more carefully
I have
at
a
the
feeling
stalls.
I'm going to end up on Judy's couch, and she's going to be saying, "Okay, now James, where did this come from?"
Do you realize how long it's been since we've all been in a school?
Well,
Yes.
we
Yeah.
can jog the old memory a little bit and go back there.
Okay.
So anyway, what was that question again? So anyway, so they
about our
don't stay
characters.
true to character, pretty
Yeah.
much.
Right.
I know mine don't. Mine really take on a personality of their own.
Oh,
Yeah.
definitely. A language, a speech pattern, lots more than just what they're thinking. It's how they're acting, their physical movements,
Yeah.
their quirks, their tics,
Yeah, yeah.
that kind of thing.
In my book, I have two small children, two young boys. And one of them is just as ornery as they come. I mean, he's just full of life, and he's always playing practical jokes that scares his brother to death. And it's his older brother. And his older brother's always crying because of the jokes his kid plays on him. And so as they grow up, the one who's the crier now, that just, he's such a wimp, ends up being a really bad person. And the kid that plays all these practical jokes ends up being an FBI agent.
Uh-huh.
So,
Interesting.
yeah.
Yeah.
So they're,
Yeah, you see
Yes.
those switches in your own children.
Yeah.
I mean, they may start out being shy or weepy or aggressive, and then somehow or another their personalities
flip.
transform.
yeah.
Yeah, it's
Sometimes
amazing.
it's the people they meet or around that can bring that out in them too, a personality.
Yeah.
So I was one of those when I was in school. Nobody knew who I was. I mean, I didn't hang out with the kids in at my school for the most part because I was very much into creating. I was in the Future Teacher Association, so I was creating chapters of Future Teacher Association. I was in the arts group, so I really didn't do a whole lot of mingling with people my age, kids my age. I basically hung out with the faculty.
Yeah.
So my childhood was a little different than most, but I can still imagine what it would be like. I had enough taste of what it would be like if I wanted to hang out with a hoodlum or,
Yeah.
I could do that. So we do take on different personalities based on who we're around.
Right.
Yeah.
I was very grown up when I was with the faculty.
Yeah.
I can imagine.
So So anything to add to that, ladies?
Well, it's interesting. When I wrote The Evil Guy, Mac, I tried to remember some, this is awful. I tried to remember some of the things my husband had told me about people he knew. He knew a bad crowd when he was young, and luckily he smartened up. He was never in, jail or any trouble like that.
Yeah.
But he had some really tough friends, and he actually knew Whitey Bulger.
Okay.
He hung out with them for a while, way back. But stories he told me was so shocking, so appalling. I thought, you know what? I'm going to make my guy that rotten. I'm going to make him so that, he breaks a guy's fingers for $50.
Okay.
Yeah.
And he's going to be flirtatious, and he's going to cheat on his wife, and he's going to be the rat killer, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
I just put down a whole bunch of things that my husband, God rest your soul, told me about.
Well, I've talked about one of the books. The first book that I ever published was The Emblem, and that character was there was one character in there that was really, really bad. But I kind of thought, and I didn't know anyone, by the way, who had ever done things this character did. But I always think about Stephen King, and I thought when he wrote Carrie or some of his other books, like, where did that come from? And I think you just have to let your imagination go. If you were that character, what would you do?
Yeah.
And he did some really, really bad things when it came to murdering someone. But you kind of have to put yourself in the place of the psychopath in order to be true to the character if you're writing a villain like that.
Yeah.
Fortunately or unfortunately, because of television and movies, we have been exposed to every possible type of character that exists in anybody's imagination.
Just in the news alone.
Just watch. I'm not going there.
It's true.
Yes, okay. But seriously, none of us have led sheltered lives in terms of not having personally known people like that, but certainly having seen them on TV, seen them in the movies,
right?
So that we're not unfamiliar with it.
No.
Right.
And because we've seen so much, Judy, we're desensitized to it in many ways.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, he was a murderer, He just killed 3 people, not 23. We've become desensitized.
Yeah.
But I'm thinking, if I could really get into somebody's psyche and write them, I've always been like the very polite writer. I sit outside and I look at him and say, okay, I'll just write this gently. But if I got into I like this.
Well, talking about writing about what we know or our inner selves, and what you just said is interesting because I had this conversation with someone. We had a shooting in Las Vegas not too long ago at the park here at Sunset Park in Las Vegas, and someone targeted the executives of one of the hotels.
Yeah.
And what's interesting, it didn't get as much coverage as you would think it would have gotten. And even when they touched it on the evening news, it was for like a minute or so, and that was it. And I was talking to someone, why is this? Because 2 executives got shot, one was murdered, and they said it wasn't 20 people.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like what you just said.
Exactly.
We want to sensationalize something if it's 10, 12, 14, 20, 100 people. But if it's just 1 or 2 people, it's the same thing, but it doesn't garner the attention as if it's a multitude of people.
Right.
It's also every day.
It is every
It's
day.
it's not an unusual thing to have somebody murdered in a city.
Right.
If everyone were reported as a major news event, there'd be no room for anything else.
Right.
Yeah, there'd be no other.
But it is
Really?
interesting, though, how we do sensationalize,
Yeah.
Up until JFK was murdered, I don't think I ever saw one newspaper in Boston that had a murder, on the front page. The only one I can remember was man goes berserk and kills himself. And I thought, what's berserk? What? My mother told me what it was. But we never had that stuff. We never heard about it.
Yeah, actually, same with me growing up. I don't remember seeing that on the front page either.
Nope, not at
The
all.
New York Times put it in the back.
So it was there.
It was there, but you had to hunt for it.
So today it's a lot easier. You don't have to go by what you know. It's like you said. We
Yes.
we actually learn from osmosis. We learn from watching TV. We learn from
Yes.
from reading other books or
Right.
watching movies. Movies. Oh my goodness.
I love movies.
Yeah, but almost every movie nowadays has got something in there. So
Which is why I don't go to the movies a whole lot.
well, except maybe comedies or
Yeah.
No, I'm serious. But no, we've been exposed to too much of everything.
yeah.
We really have. We've lost our innocence. We
Yeah.
as humanity. But I could go on about that for a long time.
Well, even the games that kids play today, especially
Video
on
games.
their Nintendo or
Yes,
whatever they're
yes.
playing, they're all very violent.
Yes.
Right.
So, that's instilled in kids today.
And the better you are at it, the better you are.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So-
Somehow that's a wonderful thing that you
Exactly.
killed 5,000 people last
Exactly.
night.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
All right. I have another question to get off that topic a little bit.
Okay.
All right. How does your imagination flow? And a lot of people, if you look back at famous authors, they had vices. I think you were on a show where we talked about this. Whether they were a drug addict, an alcoholic, or there was something in their life that
Some mental illness.
yeah, or that led to their creativity, believe it or not. So has wine or cocktails or even meditation?
Is that evil meditation? 'Cause I didn't know that.
I don't know. It may be in the next few years, but has that ever been a direction that you've used or something you've used to influence your writing?
For me, no. I
No.
can't speak for anybody else. I approach my writing as a painter,
Okay.
and I do some art. I do some painting. You look at a blank canvas, and the question is, what do you want to put on it?
Right.
And it's the same thing when you're looking at a blank page on Word.
Right.
What are you going to put
Yeah.
on it?
Yeah.
You could put on, and it's daunting because you have a million choices.
Yeah.
An infinite number of choices. I do right brain, left brain.
Okay.
I really find when I'm painting and also when I'm writing that I'm not really here, that I'm
Yeah.
using another part of my mentality to write. And if the phone rings or my dog barks, it's, oh no, now I'm back to reality again. Now I got to get back into the zone.
I'm exact.
Yes.
I do that too. If I'm putting
Yes.
something in the computer, I actually go to that place.
Yes,
And
very
it's
much
just
so.
my hands are just moving on the keyboard, putting it in.
Yes.
But yeah, I actually visualize myself in that place. But I don't use stimulants to write. I don't drink. I don't do drugs.
Yeah.
So there have been times though when I've written during the depressed mode, and I find that kind of therapeutic in a way because it's getting something out that's creative during a time at which you feel a little depressed about it. So I've really used that to my advantage.
Yeah, I don't use wine or anything like that to write. I usually use that to sleep. But
Medicinal purpose.
medicinal purposes.
But then you're dreaming, so maybe.
Oh yeah, my dreams are quite lucid. But for me, it's not looking at the blank page and saying, "What do I put?" I just sit down and boom, it all comes out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I have to clean it up and craft it. But it's like I'm in the Sun City Writers Group, and we have a topic each week, 600-word limit. And this past week was on, what was it on?
I don't remember.
I forget.
I don't
That's
belong to
another
that
show.
group.
Oh,
That's
greed,
another. I don't belong
greed.
to that group.
Yeah, you can't. It was on greed.
Okay.
And greed angers me because it's wrong. It's hurtful, hateful. I'm better than you are.
Yeah.
It's looking your nose down at people because they may not have a bottle of water or a cupcake or, Jimmy Choo shoes or whatever.
Right, yeah.
And so I was supposed to write it and read it. And everybody in the group gets to read if they've written something. Well, at about 10 of 8, I sat down and I wrote it.
Yeah.
And then at 9 o'clock, I read it. And everybody thought it was wonderful. And I hadn't even done a spell check on it.
Yeah.
But I just,
Raw data.
yeah, it's like, what's his name? You just mentioned it earlier. Just open a vein and let it pour out.
Stephen King.
Yeah, no, well, you mentioned Stephen King, but I was thinking Hemingway.
Oh,
You just
yeah.
open a vein and
Yeah.
let it pour
Let it
out.
pour, yeah. I have to tell you something funny that you said because you'll know this person, but I'm not going to mention this person's name. But This person was telling me he belongs to a writers group, and every week, or I think every 2 weeks, they meet and they're supposed to have a new chapter to what they're writing. And he's been so busy he didn't have a chapter. So what he would do is he'd go back and think, okay, we critique this every week, so I'm going to go back and pretend like I rewrote what they did. So we, and present it again like, I took your advice and I wanted to go over this again because I wasn't quite clear.
Yeah.
Very
I
creative.
won't tell his name either.
But I'm not going to.
Yeah.
I do indeed.
So,
Yeah, I don't find
Sonia.
it quite as spontaneous as you do. I have to think about it a little bit first, and then once I've got an idea, then I can sit down and it starts to flow, but I can't turn it on and off like a spigot. Doesn't
But
work
see,
for
you're a
me.
lot more creative than I am. You have an awesome imagination. I mean, she's written short stories that have just blown me away. Like a little boy named Mikey wants fireman boots, and I would never be able to write on that. It's like
my
just
Mikey-
buy them for him.
No, my Mikey one was about a ladybug.
All
And
right,
an
never mind.
And an autistic child
Never mind.
watching it.
But see, I remember the feelings that it evoked.
Yeah.
You're very creative. I'm not that creative.
It's interesting though, because you said you're a lucid dreamer. I dream in the morning, and it's usually around 3 or 4 in the morning, and then I'll sometimes get up and write it down. That's where the story I just told you a while ago came from.
yeah.
by the way.
Wow.
Earlier this week, I had that dream, and then I was obsessed here one night at the office. I was here until 11 o'clock. I could not stop writing it.
Wow.
Once it was there, I'm thinking, you got to get this on paper. So now I was obsessed to get the outline on paper. So I do that a lot.
Yeah.
A lot. And Jen can tell you, I've told her a lot of stories. I'll sometimes have 2 or 3 dreams in a week. And even though I have other work I'm trying to get out there, I cannot stop until I have that concept on paper.
It's like
Don't
trying to
wanna
get away
forget it.
from your shadow.
No,
You
I
don't
don't
want to
wanna
forget
forget
it.
it.
You
Yeah.
want to have it while it's fresh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not only that,
Unfortunately,
it's,
I understand
it's like
that.
trying to get away from your shadow.
now I have hundreds. I don't know what I'm going to do.
You'll never retire.
I know.
I don't think you'd want to.
You might find sleeping would be a way of solving all of this, because then if you were actually asleep and not dreaming.
I can't go to when I go to
I
sleep.
know.
I do start dreaming, and then
We all do every night.
I know, and then but for me, I found that if it's really something like that, I mean, I have a lot of ridiculous dreams too, but if it's something I feel like has validity or it could possibly be something, I have to put it on paper.
Yep.
That's interesting. I've
A
never
children's
done that.
story I just finished, and Jan's daughter-in-law is the illustrator for this book, came from, we were talking about how you do things I was in a depressed mode when I wrote that, and it took me an hour. And one author once said, if you write something in an hour, it's not worth reading.
Baloney.
Wrong.
Baloney.
And I disagree with them.
Oh,
on that,
absolutely.
He's
but-
just one person.
And anyway, her daughter-in-law actually illustrated. That book is actually almost ready. It's at Amazon. I'm just waiting for proofing. I want to see the physical proof before I put
Definitely.
it up there for sale. But
Definitely.
it will be up for sale more than likely this week. And it's
Wonderful.
called The Purple Caterpillar.
I'm so
Oh.
excited.
So,
yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's very good.
I've never written children's stuff.
I couldn't write children's stuff. I don't think I was ever a child.
Well, this is as much for adults as it is for kids, but it's good for adults to read it to
Two
children.
kids, but
Yeah.
also it's got a lot of lessons in there for
Yeah.
all of us. It
That's-
actually
yeah.
deals with everything from learning lessons that our teachers have taught us about growing up to diversity and prejudice, all in one little book.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
So,
great.
That's
yeah.
fabulous.
That's good.
So,
I love to read YA. Young
Yeah.
adults.
Oh, yeah.
I love young adult stuff. I think I missed a step in my growth because I love it.
I wallowed in it for years. I
Yeah.
said I did a fellowship in adolescent medicine. So I had a lot of teenagers in my practice, and dealt with a lot of teenagers.
Yeah.
I'm done with that. Thank you very much. I don't want to read anymore.
no more.
I was never a reader as a kid, but the first book that in high school that we had to read was The Grapes of Wrath.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And I
Powerful.
didn't like it at all. Then the next book we had to read was War and Peace, and I thought, if this is what reading and writing is about, I'm
Oh
done.
my goodness.
Have I
That's trial by fire to have
Yeah.
to read through a book like that as a kid.
Yeah.
Wow.
So if this is reading, I don't care if I ever learn to really read.
Yeah, it's interesting.
I remember we had to read Les Miserables, and I had a hard time grasping that. And we had to do the pros and cons of in English lit. And now I look back and I'm thinking that's such a great book.
Yeah.
You know, and made a great movie too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, it did.
Well, look at the
And a
Grapes
great
of
show.
Wrath.
Yeah.
It's a
Yeah.
great book and a great movie too. But I think you have to be in the mindset for those particular ones because look at me now. I like steampunk.
Yeah. I know. But you know, and it's interesting you mentioned that because the author of one of the books, Tamerlane, yeah, his is from an inner self in the sense that he wrote from what he knows. You know,
Yes.
he actually wrote because you thought it was a made up place,
Right?
Until he explained. And Gregory Campos is
Yes.
actually the
Yeah,
author of that
we
book.
both know him.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and
Yes.
but he actually writes based on something that he knows, his real personal experiences.
Yes.
So even though they're fictional, they're actually real places
Yeah.
and based on characters that he actually did know.
I'm reading his new book, Sky Pirate. You guys have got to read it.
I think I've heard it at the Henderson Writers
Oh,
Group.
have you? Yeah.
'Cause he brought it in, and we critique pieces.
Yeah.
But that's a good thing about writers groups.
Yeah.
Is you can bring your work in, and you have to listen to feedback because if your listeners aren't getting it, your writing isn't good.
Yeah, right.
I'm one of those who I love critiques.
Me too.
A lot of people, a lot of authors, we have a tendency. I know when I started, I had a little ego in that. I'm thinking, I wrote the greatest book on earth. But you know, you have to be willing to listen to what someone says. It doesn't mean you have to make changes because only 1 out of 7 is going to be interested in what you wrote anyway,
Yeah.
if that. So you know, but you do need to. If someone says, "I didn't quite get this," and even with the editors I've dealt with, and I've been through several. You know, they all have they'll say something like, I didn't get this, or I didn't get that. So you either end up rewording it, or maybe even taking it out
Yeah.
if it wasn't necessary.
Right.
Or you leave it in if you think, well, maybe you didn't get it, but the next person will.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, nobody can rewrite your book.
No. You have to.
However, they can certainly give you constructive criticism, and I think it's important to have an open mind to listen to it, because if you don't, then you're not going to benefit from it.
Right.
But also, you can't take everything that someone who critiques your work as gospel.
No.
I had an editor that I paid quite a bit of money to look at my book for content, flow, all that business, not just copywriting. And the person came back and said, "This is ludicrous. People don't talk like this.
Oh, yeah.
You know, this wouldn't go on. Nobody punches their wife around. I don't get this." And I'm thinking, lucky you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Lucky you.
exactly.
Right.
And she was great for the rest of the stuff, but that I just ignored
Well,
because it
because they
wasn't
never
relevant.
experienced that in their life.
Exactly. And part of my book is hoping that people will become educated
Yes.
about the prejudice against widows and about the need of battered women.
I have a theory in my book, The Alien Transcripts, the book that's getting ready to come out. And this alien that's explaining to Daniel why they're here, and he asked them questions. Daniel asked this alien questions. And one of the things they talk about is the spirit and the soul of man. And in that book, it explains that the spirit, the reason we all have different personalities and the reason we have sympathy towards the homeless, or we don't, or the reason why we love a cat or a dog or a horse, but we don't, is because we pick up energy from the different things from our past lives. As our energy grows,
Interesting.
it envelops all of those things that we've passed. But if you didn't experience being around wild animals, you might be frightened of them. But if in my past life that was an energy that I experienced or brought into my soul, then I love them, And I even talk about how that's why we have what's called opposing souls, where you meet someone and for some reason you just instantly think, I know this person, or I think this person's great. Then you'll meet someone and say, I didn't like that person, but I don't know why. And it's because they're opposing souls. There was something about that person that came from a different part of the world than what you did in its evolution through karma, or not karma, through reincarnation. So anyway,
But even karma could cause the rift in the now.
okay,
Like you were talking about the artist who was a woman and then a man. That dichotomy could cause problems for the man nowadays when he meets the lover. Because he may carry over female prejudices about having been sexually abused or something.
Well, what's interesting is in the beginning of the story, the first 2 paintings they encounter, which are in the gallery where he's going to buy them, they're of 2 women that have nothing to do. They were just acquaintances of his. Basically, he picked them up on the street, had a little thing with them, wanted to paint them. This is the guy from the 1800s. Paid them to paint them. And then it wasn't until he met this the last woman that he fell in love with, and they went on a trip. And in the dream, the character of present day, he's not those women, but he sees those women in his dreams and their interaction with that guy. But it isn't till he's basically the reincarnation of the woman from the 1800s that he experiences the relationship with.
Right. So interesting. I can't wait to read that.
Reincarnation is not part of my mindset.
Okay.
It's interesting, but I don't believe in it, if you can say believe in it or not believe in it.
We debate this all the time.
We do.
So do you believe that there's a spirit and a soul?
I believe there's a soul.
Okay.
Yes, I believe there's a soul, but we don't keep coming back for more. We're here once.
But isn't that interesting that you would say that? Because if there's a soul, that means there would be an energy.
Well, okay.
So what would happen to that energy then?
It dissipates.
Okay. That's an interesting
It
thought.
just dissipates. I mean, yes, we each have a soul, and the soul is what makes us unique. I've seen enough people die as a physician. I mean, at the moment of death. And there's a difference between a body and a person who's alive, even if they're not conscious. There's a difference. There's a physical difference. And so you can say, well, the soul has left that body now, and what's left is chemistry. It's the body. It's bones. And
So what happens to that energy? You just don't believe it. You just
dissipates.
Think, see, in my story, I
Or it go-
explained that
yeah.
that the spirit is an energy that can dissipate, but once it connects itself to a soul, which has become so strong, the energy doesn't dissipate because it's a strong energy now.
Okay, it's a belief.
Yeah. So,
Yeah, that's fine.
it's interesting that this is what we're talking about when we're talking about writing from the inner self, because it
yes.
also deals with belief and
Yes.
what you believe.
Absolutely.
We incorporate this into our stories.
So does that mean, Judy, when you die, I should look on that tree for your left eyeball?
No,
Judy dissipated.
No, not the body, the soul. No, I believe in an afterlife. I
Okay.
believe that there's a place, if you can call it a place, where every soul that has ever lived from the beginning of time goes. It's not heaven or hell. It's not judgmental. It's just a place. And when we die, we get to meet everybody who's ever lived. So I fully suspect when I die, aside from meeting my relatives who have gone before me, I'm also going to meet Moses and Maimonides and
Mozart.
Mozart and Beethoven and Rembrandt and whoever else is up there.
Okay.
So that's
but
why
they,
it's
but they
for
don't go
eternity.
but they don't go anyplace else. I mean, everybody's in the same place.
And you don't think they come back then? You
No,
don't believe
no.
that soul lives on?
No, but the soul lives on, but it lives on in whatever dimension it's
Yeah.
exactly whatever dimension it's in, but it doesn't change.
Well,
It doesn't evolve.
in honor of my husband today, this would have been his 78th birthday.
Oh, wow.
Happy birthday. When he first died, I was having lunch with some friends, and this woman sat down. Don't give me that look. This woman sat down beside me. She knew my friends. I didn't ever know her. And she said, "Did you and your husband have a dog?" I looked at her. I said, "We had 2 dogs. Why?" She said, "Your husband just told me Poopy is with him." The dog's name was Poopy,
Oh, my gosh.
Oh my God!
and it was a black chow, and it was Frank's favorite of the 2 dogs.
Wow.
There's a lot we don't know.
Yeah, and I think that's the interesting thing about
Yes.
life is that we don't know.
Yes.
Right.
And, we can have our own theories, but who knows?
They're all theories.
They're all
There's no
theories.
right
There
or
is
wrong.
no
It's just
scientific
whatever we
proof.
believe,
Right.
and believe is in
But I will tell you this.
quotation marks.
In this office where we are now, there was someone who was a famous, both actor and movie songwriter. And this was his office for writing songs. And every once in a while in the evening when I'm here late, I'll turn that men's restroom light out down the hall. And then I'll get up to leave, and there's nobody in this building, and that light's back on. And so I brought this up with our office manager, and she said, "Yeah, I've experienced that
Isn't
too."
that amazing?
I've experienced it in my home,
Yeah.
and I still don't believe. I just think there's got to be another explanation. A year to the day from my mother's death, her television, which we had plugged out and plugged out the cable and plugged out the switch, started creating static. And my daughter had heard it, and I heard it, and we went in, and there was static on the screen. There was no way there could be static on that screen. It was totally unplugged from any electrical source.
So it sounds
like,
like, you
"Hi,
believe
Mom."
just a little bit, yeah.
Hi,
You know.
Mom. Yeah.
So anyway, and that's what my book is, by the way,
Yeah.
is about. It's not about telling you this is the way it is. It just opens up
It's
possibilities.
an option. Exactly,
Yeah.
it's an option.
And that comes from my inner self and
Yes,
what I
of course.
believe. You know, and that I believe. I'm not one of those who's dead set in that that's not possible.
Me neither.
You know, I like we were talking about earlier. I always open myself up to possibilities, and it's kind of like what you said with the one person who critiqued your book and said that's not possible. First of all, it is possible.
Yeah,
It's a
of course.
reality every day. But secondly, even if it wasn't, all the time we hear of things that say that couldn't possibly happen, and it's usually the things that we say that can't possibly happen that do.
Right.
So
And speaking of my book and saying things can't possibly happen, right now there's such a dichotomy that's making me nuts. The Me Too hashtag movement and the love affair people have with the book. I can't say the book because I'll get in trouble, but the book that's very poorly written, all about S&M.
no, we can say it. Because
Okay.
we've talked about it many times on there. 50 Shades
50
of Grey.
Shades of
I mean,
Grey.
she does quite well, so I don't think she's
She
going to
can't
care.
write. She can't write for beans, but in my opinion, but I went to see a movie called The Book Club,
Okay.
and it's about 4 women who use that book as a means to reinvent themselves and to begin dating again and having sex again and this and that and that. Fine, I'm all for people, getting back in touch with your libido, but why are you using a book where a man batters women? If he were not rich, he'd just be a bastard. He'd just be a batterer. Why are we celebrating Christian, whatever his name is, and his beating and tying women up and beating them? And still, on the other hand, we're trying to stop domestic violence, and we're stopping the Me Too.
Okay, but it's interesting you should say this because you're talking about, it's called S&M, is that what it's called? Yeah.
Sadomasochism.
Yeah, I was on a show, a co-host on a show called Real Talk with Mrs. Please. And she used, I don't go to the clubs, I'm not into all this other stuff, but she would go and find, to these clubs, not to experiment, but to have something to talk about on the air. She wanted to have real facts so that she wasn't just making stuff up. And oftentimes she would have a guest on from these different clubs or organizations. And she just loved to talk about this stuff because I'd get so embarrassed. And we videotaped that show too. But anyway.
In Technicolor.
Yeah. But the thing is that, that's real life. And maybe it's not my cup of tea or your cup of tea, but some people it is their cup of tea.
Absolutely,
You
but
know, for whatever reason.
as a society, I'm just saying that they don't see the connect. That's battering, and this is battering, and you're celebrating this battering, but not
Think
that
this is
battering.
bad. And I know what you're saying. There's a fine line there. Like, when is it now abuse?
Right, exactly.
But for whatever reason, there are some people who want that.
Well, if they want it, then it's voluntary, as
Right.
opposed to the Me Too, which is involuntary.
and domestic
Right.
violence
That's the
is
entirely different
involuntary.
thing. Right.
Good thinking.
Entirely different.
And I
Yep,
think
you're
that's
right.
what
Yes.
you have to understand.
Yes.
It's different when you accept it and want it, as opposed to someone who's saying, you can't just assume that if you're touching someone's leg, that you can just do that with everyone. Maybe the person that you're very comfortable with does have a problem with that, but you can't assume. It's the same thing with hugs. I know people that you can't really give them a hug. They do not want that hug.
Right.
And if it's uninvited and you know it, then you shouldn't do it.
Right,
Exactly.
right.
And I think that's what you're talking
Yes,
about.
I'm talking about voluntary and involuntary.
I mean, I am a hugger, but at the same time, if I know someone doesn't want a hug, I am not going to touch them.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is the difference between the people who have been abused in the Me Too milieu, as opposed to people who are inviting it.
Right.
That's an entirely different story. You can't equate them.
Right. And
But this movie,
Oh, sorry.
equates that as being, this is the impetus I've got to go out and, be this new woman.
Yeah. No.
That wouldn't be my template.
No.
But,
think of other things.
But going back to what you said, that wasn't something she knows. So she had to have either heard about it or read about it, to write about this. At least if it is, she hasn't disclosed that yet.
I could write about it. I have a friend here in Vegas who was a dominatrix.
dominatrix?
Thank you, dominatrix.
Yeah.
And she used to handle some very, very famous people.
Handle is the operative word in that.
Let's not go there, ladies. But and actually, same with me. I know someone who used to do the same thing, prostitute themselves out. Actually, a couple people. And just from their stories, I could write about that because now I know about it,
But
even though I didn't participate in something like that. So, and that's what we're talking about, in writing from your inner self. Your inner self isn't always you.
Right.
It's what you know or have experienced or learned or heard from someone else.
That's a good distinction.
Yes, it's what
Very
you've
good
absorbed in your
distinction.
lifetime.
Yeah. So, well, unfortunately, we're running out of time. This is fun, but we are running out of time. So, Judy
I could
Salz,
spend days here.
I would like to
Yeah.
ask you again, where can we learn more about your book? And your book, name, title first, and then where can we find
My
out about
book
it?
is called Worthy,
Get your face up.
and it is available on Amazon. It's also available on my webpage, which is authorjudysalz.com.
Okay. And the other Judy?
My book is called Shelter Me, When Friendship is All That Remains, and it's available on all online bookstores and also from Ink and Quill Publishing in Henderson, Nevada. And it's available on Kindle, Nook, hard copy, et cetera, et cetera. And I do have a website that's in construction.
Okay.
It would be judyshinelogan.com.
All right. And Henderson's really Las Vegas. It's a separate city, but it's all the same.
All right.
Mine's also available on Kindle.
Oh, okay. And Jan?
You can find mine on Amazon.com, and you can go to janetcorsi.com and .net and everything, and you're going to find The Secrets of Time there.
Okay. And I actually have The Purple Caterpillar, which is a children's story that will be out by the time this goes on the air. And you'll find that on Amazon or Kindle. Be available in both versions. So.
Very
Is
nice.
is this going to be a hardback book, or is it?
No,
be
it's going to be basically a paperback.
just a paperback.
Well, it's a kid's size
Be
book.
careful about just a paperback.
Well, yeah, absolutely.
Mine's just a
Yeah.
paperback.
I mean, it'll be the 8.5 by 11, big picture book, but
Right.
it'll,
Right.
it won't be in the hardback version. At least not right now.
And it's
So.
beautiful book.
It really
everybody.
I'm really proud of that book.
Yes.
I very
Great.
much am. And Veronica did a tremendous job with the illustrations on that
Yeah.
book. So I'd like to thank our guests Judy Logan and Judy Salz, and along with my panelist Janet Corsi. And to find more out about our guests, just go to aspectsofwriting.com. That's aspectsofwriting.com. We'll also have a video portion of this, which will be posted to youtube.com/aspectsofwriting. It'll also be available on Roku TV. We also will have the show. It will broadcast live at 1 o'clock on Saturday. We always have our show at 1 o'clock on Saturdays on amfm247.com. They archive our show there. We archive the show on aspectsofwriting.com, on iTunes, on iHeart. We're also on about 14 terrestrial stations, and there's a few
As
more
opposed
places.
to extraterrestrial stations.
Yeah,
It's getting there. We'll be there soon.
we have to pay extra for them.
I'm sorry. I had to do that.
Yeah, the alien transcripts. I got it. So anyway, just go to aspectsofwriting.com, scroll down to the middle of the page, over to the right, and it'll list everything there for you. So until next time, this is your host, James Kelly, remind you, if you can dream it, you can write it. Thank you, everyone, for being on the show.
Thank you, James.
Thank you very much.
Great show, ladies.
Thank you.